touch each other, please. They go right down deep, and they have collided. So both the BWT cars collide.
So internecine squabble between the two Williams. Looks to me like Rosberg tapped the back of Webber. That is absolutely the last thing any Formula One team wants to see.
It's Alesi and Heidfeld. I don't know what's happened, but it's the poor Alain Prost, as if he hadn't got enough pressure on him.
Oh, we've lost a wheel. It's a racing engineering car that's ripped his left wheel off. Furious at his teammate. That will be a very fun team briefing.
Hello there, welcome to the Grand Prix Rejects podcast Teammate Collision, starring myself, Jeremy, and my colleague Lennart.
As always, I am happy to be here, and I am very thankful that you are taking the time to listening to our opinions.
It is the 24th of May 2022. We're aiming for something like a monthly podcast these days, so it's only been 3 races since the last one. And lots of stuff has happened in the meantime, Lennart. First of all, our website has come back to life.
Indeed. GP Rejects may never die again.
It may not die for the 5th or 6th time.
No, yeah, we obviously... I shouldn't be saying we. Our great technicians, Miguel and Anna, have been working hard at getting all the updates the site needs, so... We're happy to have a much improved front end and obviously even better back end. So I am really thankful for their work, and so obviously should be everyone in the community, I think.
Yeah, no, very, very much thank you to Miguel and Anna. We they can tell you from their own mouths, I'm sure, but our back end, I don't pretend to be an IT person, but the website seems to have not been updated in many, many years and was effectively being tied together with chewing gum and sellotape. So yeah, we're looking to say that the future of GP Rejects is looking strong, and we got lots of things in store for the rest of 2022.
For sure, we are very excited about a lot of things. Obviously, we don't want to spoil everything right now, but there's great potential in the future, and I hope you're going to keep joining us for this ride, and obviously hope that you are going to have fun with the various approaches to telling rejectful and other fun stories in the future.
Today, Lennart, you're going to introduce a segment in our second half relating to a little bit about Rubens Barrichello and a little bit about Jenson Button, more towards Barrichello. Do you want to explain that to us?
Yeah, we decided to look at a underrated teammate rivalry in Formula One history. Obviously, everyone talks about the Rosberg-Hamilton story, Alain Prost versus Ayrton Senna. So we decided to take a look at a rivalry again that was somewhat underrated in Formula One history, mostly because it wasn't too long and 2 of years were in not so good cards. But we're going to look at the story of Rubens Barrichello versus Jenson Button.
Exactly. I mean, while these two teammates never collided, and they were never except for one season, they were never at a real front-running car. Their rivalry and their teammate era had some interesting highs and lows, mostly lows, but the general evaluation is that it ended with Jenson Button as world champion, and Rubens Barrichello at Honda specifically, we're talking about the years 2006 to 2009, kind of faded into a little bit of obscurity. It's sort of a lesser-known part of the driver's career, who at the time had the longest ever career in Formula One. But we'll get onto that in the second half of our podcast. Before this podcast began, you, Lennart, you introduced it as the Animated Barrichello Chat, ABC for short.
Indeed, because everyone loves abbreviations, don't they? Well, I do, and I don't care if you don't.
So I decided to try to compete with you here and make my own 3-word abbreviation DEF to describe our first segment, which will be where we'll go over the last 3 races, do a little bit of updating on what's been going on in Formula One the last couple of weeks. So I got DEF. So my first one was damning evaluation, Ferrari. Then there was difficult excuses, Ferrari. You can sort of see there's like a Ferrari kind of thing going on here. Then I had definitely embarrassing, Ferrari. Disappointment, enter Ferrari. And then I sort of got a bit desperate with more. And I started thinking, okay, whose names in Formula 1 begin with D, E, or F? So then I went towards Daniel Ricciardo, became my latest product of my ire. So I named it Daniel's Era Finished. Or Daniel Exhibits Failure, which looking back on it, that's quite a harsh statement. Then there's Daniel's Eclipsing Future, which I thought was quite poetic.
Oh, beautiful.
Then I had, of course, Discuss Esteban Fernando. And then there was Don't Eek Fernando. I'm not quite sure what I meant by that, but in retrospect. Then I wrote Deserves Esteban Flapjack, because he's done a good job so far. And then my final one, Esteban Faster. This is all part of the my competition with Lennart here to make a better abbreviation. So send us in your message in the comments which you think is the best one, and we'll make that the official DEF part of the podcast.
Again, do it, let us know in the comments, and we will gladly listen to you.
So, I'm sure, Lennart, you're a man of taste. And I'm sure in the last couple of weeks you have probably been watching the sort of obscure underground musical competition known as the Eurovision Song Contest.
Short of off topic, it's awkward. I kinda didn't.
Well, you're from Germany and I'm from Britain, and there are traditions in the Eurovision Song Contest. And one of those traditions is that both of our countries tend to talk ourselves down when we come into this competition. We tend to usually come last and get no points.
That indeed is the old tradition.
However, this year, the UK did really, really well. They got a TikTok star named Sam Ryder, and he came in and sang really well, and he stole everyone's hearts, apparently. Apparently his song was good. I did watch it, but yeah. And he came second in the Eurovision Song Contest, and it was a great surprise, and it was a perfect example of, a perfect example of a country which doesn't take very much faith in itself, but when they put in a good act, can come out really well if they just try. It sort of reminds me of what happened at the Spanish Grand Prix last Sunday. There was a British driver at the Spanish Grand Prix who drives for a German team who just, in the first couple of laps, had a mistake, had a problem, got hit by another driver, and he just didn't have the mentality. He said, I need to retire the car, I need to do this, I need to go home, kind of thing. And what happened? He actually got in the car, he kept going, and he ended up finishing basically fourth, take away a couple of seconds from a late race problem. I'm obviously talking about Lewis Hamilton here. This anyone who's seen the race knows exactly what I'm talking about. But I guess I'd like to start off this discussion with Lewis Hamilton's headspace as the topic. We've seen in the last couple of races this really interesting situation whereby Lewis Hamilton is in a seriously strange headspace. What do you think of his last couple of races and the season in general, Lennart?
Well, in a way, it pretty much is a mirror of some of the early parts of last season, and a couple of other times. The ugly truth is, as great as Sir Lewis Hamilton is, the reality is mentally he's a frontrunner. And if there's one thing he never, in his entire career, has really handled well, it's when things go against him. Like, when it's troublesome, when his races gets messed up by things outside of his control, he tends to quit even though there's absolutely no reason to. Like, take for example I think it was a 2014 Belgian Grand Prix where he got hit by Nico Rosberg, had a puncture, and he also did the forget it guys, we gotta retire this car, we gotta save the engine.
You're right, it's not the first time that Hamilton has had this situation, and anyone who knows my opinions on Formula 1 knows that I don't really buy into the Lewis Hamilton hype very much. But it's been really interesting because really Mercedes haven't had a bad car all season. I mean, in the hands of George Russell, his new teammate, the new Sam Ryder equivalent, who has just kind of jumped into the team in a situation whereby people are saying, oh no, Mercedes have got no hope this year, and has finished into the top 5 in 6 races in a row. You know, it's just fascinating to see Hamilton against Russell, and specifically psychologically, it's almost more interesting than their on-track actions, because really, well, take Imola is the perfect example. After the race, whereby Hamilton spent almost the entire race in 14th and only inherited his official 13th place because one of the guys in front got a 5-second penalty. You know, there was so much complaining and so much will for the world to go around him, and I thought it was very fascinating, because it's at times like this when the team isn't the absolute best and they can't just rely on Hamilton to pull out a pole position and an easy win from the front, where team politics becomes so much more interesting, really. People like to talk about front-running teams as being the most interesting psychologically, but actually I think it's just before you get to the front. It's somewhere where you're on that edge, as Mercedes is. And you had Toto Wolff on the radio saying, you know, sorry for giving you such a bad car, to a guy whose whose teammate has just finished 4th. And it's been very interesting, I think. I think it's really, I don't want to say it's damaged Hamilton's career, because his reputation, I mean, because obviously, you know, he has the entire world behind him, willing him to victory. But I think it has kind of fueled lots of Hamilton's skeptics as to his mental state, and how he just simply doesn't want to drive a car which is 3rd fastest, even though most of the grid, to be honest, would give an arm and a leg to drive the Mercedes right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, again, what can you say? I mean, the thing is, it's one thing if this was like, okay, we have never seen him like that before. Like, okay, it's just not something he has experience with. It's not something that is in his nature, so to speak. So that sounds really melodramatic now that I hear myself saying it. The thing is, yeah, he pretty much just doesn't quite have what it really takes to be in the midfield, so to speak, to put forth the effort that, say, Alonso is putting forth, and just doing the goddamn best with what miserable equipment, in very sarcastic quotes. Marks.
A car that is still not, as of yet, actually had any retirements, if you compare it to, you know, the Red Bulls, the Ferraris.
I mean, honestly, up to the point, it's even, the thing is, it even hurts his own, well, legacy is a bit over dramatic, but it even puts some of his actual achievements in slower cars into question, because if he folds like that in most difficult situation, was, for example, the 2009 McLaren really that bad, or was just Heikki Kovalainen just not good? And obviously that is a ridiculous question, and therefore I shouldn't even need to clarify that it was a rhetorical one. But again, the thing is, yeah, I mean, when you fold like that, you just are saying, okay, I can only do it from the front. I can only do it in great cars, which again is obviously not true. But yeah, it's just it's poor luck.
It's almost like it's adding fuel to his detractors to his legacy, because it's like, I don't know how you could see it this way, but I suppose you could see it as, oh, it's a testament to his stubbornness that he's so determined to win. But it's like, actually no, I think most people would probably look at it and go, that's kind of pathetic. Like like most people, almost 99% of the drivers in the world in any sort of series are usually not driving in the best car and not winning every race, and they have to put up with that every day. Yeah. It's like the world doesn't revolve around Lewis Hamilton. And I mean, he's had one podium this season so far, and that was inherited at the season opener, because both Red Bulls blew up at the very end. So it'll be interesting to see where Hamilton's season goes, because to me it really reeks of Vettel when Ricciardo joined, and it was just like a walkover from his new teammate, and it just didn't seem like the world champion that we knew. And it really, seasons like Vettel's 2014 really do, in my opinion at least, call into question the legacy of major world champions, like in this case Lewis Hamilton. But yeah, that's the most interesting thing I think for me off the track. As well as that, I mean, the major talking point, I suppose, I mean, it wouldn't be at the front because since the last time we did a podcast, Max Verstappen has won all 3 races and the sprint race at Imola. So it's like, it's quite clear that things are going back in Red Bull's direction. So our prediction for that was, at least my prediction, was absolutely, completely wrong. I think our prediction that Mercedes would come back and probably win a race, especially after having seen Spain, seems like it's way more likely. I mean, George Russell had a serious chance of winning in Spain.
Yeah, I mean, Mercedes themselves, including Hamilton himself, said that the car now feels much better, performs much better. You could see the porpoising was just not there. So I genuinely think they got, if not outright the best lineup among the top 3, then jolly well close to it. And so, again, we predicted a victory for them coming in the future, and I, for one, fully stand with that prediction. So, which incidentally, I just wanted to go back to one point just for a second. The thing is, you could see that the car was much better simply because he could fight all the way back. You have to remember on the team radio, his engineer said, "Oh, we can get P8," and they got. They got P4 before a technical issue took that away, but yeah, so this car's good again, and the drivers are good, so again, Russell could be joining the ranks of the winners, Hamilton could extend his record to 100 whatever.
Yeah, who knows at this point how many wins Hamilton has. But yeah, no, you're right, and it's when you said that Mercedes probably have the strongest lineup, if not very close. If you were judging on last year's pace, I would say that, yeah, they probably do have the strongest lineup. This year has been interesting because Sergio Perez has obviously gone up a huge amount in terms of pace. He's doing a fantastic job as a number 2. And it's, I think the most interesting driver right now is probably Carlos Sainz, who has just totally lost stock, I would say, this year.
To put it this way, he's been most interesting for GP rejects, which...
Yeah, I suppose so. Well, Carlos Sainz has been out-qualified by Charles Leclerc in every race so far, and I think I can't remember a time already in the last couple of races where he's actually properly challenged for the lead, if he's even led a lap. It's been quite a walkover from Leclerc. Leclerc himself has obviously made a couple of mistakes along with the Ferrari team, but I'm sure we'll get to that. But Carlos Sainz has, he got tagged in Imola by Daniel Ricciardo, but that was also his own fault for being so far down in the qualifying, and also in Spain he got hit by that errant gust of wind at turn 4, which knocked him into the gravel, and it wasn't. Some would say that it wasn't his fault, but he and Max Verstappen were the only 2 who made that mistake.
No.
But it really should have been his job to be the number 2 to take that win, which Red Bull effectively stole from Ferrari. Whereas when Verstappen had his problem, Perez was now the number 1 favourite to win. When Leclerc had his problem, Sainz was he was in P6 or something because he'd just driven into the gravel 10 laps previously.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's one thing, like, if you have something going against you, that can happen. There are drivers whose season pretty much were dead on arrival just because they had bad luck in the first couple of races, but there comes a point at which you have to then make sure that those things don't break your neck, and that's the problem. Sainz pretty much couldn't afford a gust like that happening. He couldn't afford for example, he couldn't have afforded what happened to Leclerc simply because he already put himself on such a back foot with his silly mistakes in Imola, with the thing in, where was it?
It was Australia where he drove off
yes,
on lap 2.
Thank you. that these mistakes in Australia, and that's when you are at the point, okay, now you can't have bad things happen to you because now you already made so many mistakes that you are pretty much doomed. Like
exactly. Yeah, he's used up all his chances, hasn't he, already? And we're only 6 races in.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like Max had his 2 retirements, and but the thing is, he made no mistakes afterward. He hasn't put a foot wrong in these last 3 races, and therefore he could afford the bad luck of then being hit by that gust. Getting involved with that gust, I don't actually know how the physics of that work. But the thing is, that is something that can happen to him now. Simply because he got the base, he got the confidence to know, okay, he even had the DRS problem. Remember that one in addition to the gust. And while he complained about it, the reality is he got the job done. He did what he needed to, and he did what he needed to in the races before. So he can pretty much, up to a point, afford to have luck go against him because he's good enough to then not add onto the pile of manure.
This podcast is coming out before the watershed. So thank you very much.
Yeah. That's the thing. That's what Sainz's problem is. He pretty much has to be flawless from now on, and I don't think he, with all due respect, has got what it takes to be flawless for 16 races in a row.
Yeah, I mean, everyone gets hit by an errant gust of wind from time to time, but it's, I think
especially me after the beans.
every
8-year-old humor.
Every driver has problems from time to time, and up until Spain, I would say most people would have said that, okay, yeah, things like this happen, but you can only have so many of those. These things happen before it becomes a thing, and when it's three out of 4 races, you have some sort of major unfortunate circumstance. It does pile up, and I think he's easily the worst out of the top 6 right now, and it's really dragging Ferrari down. As a quick side note, I should probably mention, for the sake of attempting objectivity, that yes, Max Verstappen has complained a lot in Spain as well when it came to his own DRS issues. He's kind of redeemed himself by, as you say, eventually sorting them out and getting past, and not driving himself off the road, as a lesser driver probably would have done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose I should mention that Max Verstappen also did complain a lot, and it would be a fanboy of me not to mention that.
See, the thing is, I personally am someone who actually doesn't really mind drivers complaining about on the team radio. I don't want to mention the one exception I have, because this is not a Hamilton Basher podcast, no matter what we try, no matter how we come across. And even that is not because I have a problem with complaining, but because we all know these complaints are nonsense. Oh no, my tires are gone. Does 70 laps on one set. No, anyway. Lame dicks aside, the thing is, team radio is really the most intimate you're going to get with a Formula 1 driver. And when you are hot, when you are in the action, you complain about things. That is normal. I complain about things when playing racing games. Or when I'm playing other sport games. No way that was a 3. His foot was on the line to take him. Or when watching sports, the same thing, really. Thing is, while some think drivers are whining when they do that, I personally feel it's just, again, part of the business. And it's not like it would have been any better in the past. If we had team radio in the 70s, we all know, let's keep it real, that Lauda would have screamed their fucking heads off.
Yeah, just imagine having to listen to Senna and Prost whining over the radio. Imagine Imola 89 and just having to listen to them whine at each other.
Seriously, exactly like that, and all this stuff. So, yeah, it's just normal. It's just human. So, again, when you don't go at your race engineers, like we have complained about Yuki Tsunoda last year doing that. I personally hate Kimi's. I know what I'm doing. No, you obviously didn't. Otherwise, you wouldn't have run completely off the track in Interlagos, you jackass.
Moving swiftly on. I suppose we should
one.
quickly tie up some loose ends of our predictions from last time, or at least our giant claims. One of which, to use this current topic, Yuki Tsunoda, he seems to be having a bit of a mini revival. Pierre Gasly's had a couple of kind of crappy races, to be honest, in a row, and Tsunoda's been out qualifying him not once, but 2 or 3 times.
Which is something he didn't do all of last season except once.
Yeah, it's something he did. 21 races in a row was being out qualified by his teammate. So it's a bit of a shock to see Tsunoda doing a bit better this year. I mean, shock is maybe an overstatement, but you and I are very proud, Lennart. So I suppose you should eat some humble pie if Tsunoda does indeed do very well this season.
With extra strawberries. The thing is, I'm going to obviously have to take his word for it, but obviously Gasly himself said, okay, I could perform a lot better than I did. Whether you want to believe that or not is honestly your choice. But the reality is, regardless of that, Tsunoda has simply been good. Has simply actually delivered on the hype he had at the very start of last season. He's now come out, does his job, doesn't moan at his engineer all the time, as far as we can tell. So, yeah. Round of applause for him, simple as. He's been doing a fine job, and if he continues to do that, then he won't be gone as we predicted in our Carlos way at the end of the season podcast. So, good on him. Keep doing that, Yuki.
And speaking of people who may or may not get fired soon, we predicted that Haas were going to emulate the 10-year anniversary of the FW34 at the hands of Pastor Maldonado and Bruno Senna, who famously threw away about 7,000 points over the course of the season together. Magnussen has done obviously much better than Schumacher has, which is still quite impressive considering his late arrival into the series with a brand new rule set, etc. However, Spain was just another example of Haas throwing away points. It was a stupid accident when he hit Hamilton and cost Hamilton however many 40-50 seconds. And Mick Schumacher in Miami smashed into Sebastian Vettel when he was in something like 9th or 8th place, which would have got him his first points in the series, and it all fell apart. Same way in Imola, he was running at about 9th or 10th, about to steal a point or two, and then his tires blew up and he fell all the way to the back. Haas have had some mediocre strategies, if I'm putting it kindly, and the occasional, far too occasional, brain fart from both of their drivers. And as we predicted, they're starting to fall behind in terms of pace. They've had some pretty good qualifying pace, but it's not going to last forever, and they really haven't got nearly as many points as I would say expecting, but perhaps what I really mean is hoping that they would have at this point.
Like, it shouldn't upset me. As I said in the last podcast, Haas has been doing this stuff since literally their first season.
Yeah.
They come in with a good car, get 1 or 2 good finishes out of it, slowly drop off, do something stupid, do a lot of stupid things, depending on the season, and then just basically are nowhere. And let's be honest, I don't even care much for Mick, as should be known by now. But even I would say that this is just a giant waste. Waste of time, waste of money, waste of what skill Mick has. It's just the same goddamn manure. And it's going to continue like that in perpetuity until Gene Haas gets tired of it, or he sees some sense in his mind, in his soul, in his whatever, to not accept this mediocrity anymore and gets Steiner just to leave and do his silly, mean Drive to Survive nonsense somewhere else. It's just... I don't want to say they disgust me, but they are damn damn close to making me say that they disgust me.
That's a lot of dams. There's a lot of
that's a lot of dams
here for us.
Gotta watch out for all those beavers around here.
And speaking of American disappointments, the big off-season news right now is probably even more so than any other news right now, the most baffling thing in the Formula One, which is the Formula One teams and the FIA's very public coldness towards Andretti and their publicly stated plans to enter Formula One in a couple of years. Andretti have not made a formal application to join the Formula One grid.
Though it should be noted that is because there are simply no applications open right now from the FIA, so nobody who would even want to apply can. Therefore, it's not that they haven't applied for it out of their own lack of drive, but simply because it's not an option.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, thank you for adding that. Yeah, the situation is really interesting. We had anyone who's followed F1 for 10, 15 years will have heard many different news articles and talk about various teams, various projects being formed. Oh, these people, was it Red Force and I don't know, Parasite, and I don't know what the hell their names were, but
it was Panthera.
Panthera or
Panther with A.
Panthera, like Pantera, but with an H.
Basically, it's a Jaguar knock. Ordering a Jaguar on Wish.
Because we all know how fast that would be. Yeah, we used to have in the old days, every couple of months, there would always be rumors of new teams joining. And I don't know, there was always a buzz. Bernie Ecclestone's, he has a reputation of being very cold, and he somewhat pushed this mentality, which is very much strong in the FIA these days, which is, I'd rather have 10 teams than 12 teams if the other two are crap. And I think everyone probably at GP Rejects profoundly disagrees with this sentiment, but it's been interesting how F1 really hasn't had any interest from new people joining in at least 3 or 4 years. And obviously the situation is that Formula One hasn't been doing well for a huge amount of time, and Haas was a huge exception, and absolutely baffling to me how it actually worked when you can, and it took a huge amount of supply from other teams.
Yeah, that's when you basically run a Ferrari.
It took a lot of help from other teams to make it happen, and so it's just, I find it fascinating. I understand that Formula One is doing really well right now, but I find it fascinating that they would be so publicly cold to Andretti, which is a famous name, wanting to join. It's
a famous
something
American
a little bit,
name, mind you.
Yes, that's true. A famous American name, and someone with a little bit of a reputation, not just some people operating out their garage in Suffolk. It's like it's something really meaningful, which could actually severely impact the future of Formula One for the better. I mean, call me an idiot, but surely having 11 teams is better than having 10.
I mean, we're talking about a grid where the Formula 2 champion doesn't have a drive. Yeah, I can fully agree with you. Andretti would be a very rich addition, both in history and present. It would, again, give more chances, especially for the much maligned Alpine Young Driver program, which could actually park a driver there, since the entire time Andretti has been basically saying, hey, we got this cooperation with Alpine about customer engines going. But the thing is, a lot of it is politics, in fact. Yeah, the thing is, a lot of it is politics. You have to remember, every new team not only takes away a bit of a pie, so that is mathematically not that big at all, but the bigger issue, every additional team expands the voting requirements to get things done, to block things. And that is, for example, why you see the most vocal opposition coming from the actual top teams, who really shouldn't be bothered by whether Andretti is there or not. To a Red Bull, to a Mercedes, let's be real, Andretti in the first couple of seasons would just be another car to lap. So, but the thing is, because they would be A, aligned with Alpine, and B, simply adding to the number of votes required to have a majority or a supermajority, they don't really have much interest in adding them to the grid simply because then their influence on the sport would be reduced, and for obvious reasons they don't want that, which, I mean, it's understandable from the point of view, okay, we want what is best for us, but it once again shows the inherent folly of letting teams decide what goes and what doesn't go.
No, exactly. If it shows anything, it shows that the F1 teams really shouldn't have nearly as much power as they do, especially when it comes to influencing the addition of new teams. Because all they'll do is, well, they'll just be king rat at the end of the day. All they'll do is eat each other until there's no teams left. Because if you have a situation whereby, say Williams decide to pull out tomorrow, and you have 9 teams, and suddenly they're scrabbling around for more teams. It's sort of a very short-term thinking, which I find very strange. But watch this space, I suppose, when it comes to...
Why do you find short-term thinking in Formula 1 teams strange?
Touche. I want to make one more footnote before we move on. Bottas has done very, very well. I wrote down in my notes here that Bottas requires the word "but" after every compliment. Because Bottas is basically best of the rest right now. Lando Norris had a fantastic podium at Imola, which obviously we should have probably mentioned before now. But Bottas, I would say, is the most consistent best of the rest runner outside those top 6 drivers. And it's been really, really nice to see him do well. I think we did mention him in the previous podcast, but it's good to mention him again.
Yeah, I think we praised him, but we also praised his teammate, and well, the last races have shown the talent differential. I am still much higher on Zhou than I am on the rookies from last year, well, with the exception of Tsunoda, who has turned it around. But obviously, you can see the difference between him and a multi-time race winner, who is now freed from the shackles of being a number 2 driver, who can simply do his top midfielder drive thing that he did before he got to Mercedes. And it's been a revelation to see him do his work, and couldn't be happier for him. He seems to enjoy life very much right now, and who can blame him? So good on him, and I hope he can continue like that.
Yeah, and the reason why I began this by saying you have to put the word "but" after every compliment is because there's been close to heroics, but I guess that's kind of half the appeal, isn't it? There's been close to heroics for Bottas for many, many times. He was so close to overtaking George Russell at Imola on the last lap. He was so close to finishing in front of both Mercedes at Miami, but then he made a mistake going around too wide around one of the corners and let them both pass. He was so close to doing well in Spain, but his tyre strategy didn't really work out and he started falling behind. He was on a 2-stop when everyone else was on 3, and so I'm hoping that Bottas gets an actual something really heroic. He holds up for Mercedes. It's not going to happen, but it would be really good if you could have that real 10 out of 10 race. Because he's almost there. He still makes mistakes, but he's almost there.
Yeah, it's pretty much, well, for lack of a better word, an unfinished masterpiece, and I do hope as well he can pull out just one drive that can stand for his entire season, where it's pretty much just everything goes just right. And yeah, again, for some, we have to remember that I think on this podcast and in general, we've been giving Bottas a lot of, again, manure. And so it's all the more pleasant to see someone in the right situation, if not outright proving us wrong, then outright saying, hey guys, remember how I got here? I got some skills. And yeah, again, let's just see him have his masterpiece to round out his place as one of the better drivers of this year so far, and probably in the upcoming months. I can fully agree with you. Since you mentioned it, we might as well give a quick shout out to McLaren, the North podium. The thing is, McLaren have basically continued what they did in the first 3 races, and that is be all over the place, both in good ways and bad ways. So what really can you say about them?
Well, Daniel Ricciardo is only in one place, and that's 12th. I want to say that there's some fluctuating performance, but it's only fluctuating on one side of the garage. It's just very depressing to see Daniel Ricciardo's terrible 2021 seep into his 2022. Why is he so bad at McLaren? I don't understand it. Because his Renault career was quite strong. Like, maybe you got rose-tinted glasses, but he did take out a podium or two in that Renault, and I mean, he did win at Monza, although that's completely unbelievable now that you think about how many races it is now. 28 races at McLaren, of which he's gotten the podium, I think, once, and that was Monza, pardon me, where he won dominatingly. It's like, what a strange stint he's having.
Well, there could be a very simple explanation that some people might simply be overthinking it in terms of he's simply on the decline. You have to remember, he's in his 11th season now. He is 32 years old, which, mind you, by racing driver standard isn't that old, but it's old enough to possibly just start going downhill. It's as simple as that. He's been in the sport for a very long time, which again people tend to forget, but he ain't no spring chicken anymore, and Lando Norris is. So it could just see, okay, he had his shot, he was at the top, won a lot of races, a lot of amazing races, and now it's slowly going away. Like,
I hope not. I really hope not.
Obviously, his personality would be a big loss if he is now on the decline, but again, sometimes it is really as simple as that. Again, it's his 11th season.
Most experienced Australian driver ever as well, which is crazy to think about.
Amazing. Really?
Yeah, he's the most. At least that's what David Croft and Martin Brundle said. So I believe everything they say.
I, on principle, don't, but I come to think of it, it makes sense. I mean, especially when we're talking about race numbers, because Webber, I think, was from 2002 to 2013, which are 11 years. But he had all full seasons, so he might have been technically a bit longer around in terms of time, but honestly, that's just by now just a matter of weeks. But obviously, Ricciardo had more races because longer seasons. So yeah, for one, I will give the statement of a Mr. Croft actual credibility.
I'm pretty certain it's not Croft who came up with it. I'm pretty certain it's probably an earpiece.
The intern, yeah.
So, the unpaid intern at Formula One.
Where would Formula One be without the unpaid intern? Shout out to my brothers.
Speaking of unpaid interns, Sergio Perez kicked up a lot of stink after Spain to do with this whole number 2 thing. And when we began this segment, I was saying that Perez is doing the perfect job as number 2 because he's finishing second every race when Verstappen wins. But he did kick up a stink, and although it may be just a storm in a teacup, we had a situation whereby he was not happy with the fact that he had to move over for Max Verstappen, and you can say from his perspective there are points in his favour. He didn't drive off the road, and they obviously did put him on a strategy whereby he would be, he would lose time on Verstappen. So I understand his point, but also he knew when he was getting into this job that this is the situation, and it's also high time that Sergio Perez did well, and he's had a really, really good stint so far. Had he not had that retirement in Bahrain, he would have all top 4 finishes in every single race this season. So I once again, for the sake of I suppose for the sake of drama, I should hope that it all deteriorates, but for the sake of sanity, I would hope that he grows up a bit and realizes the situation he's in at Red Bull.
See, the thing is, I think he didn't necessarily have a problem with being the number 2 driver, but I think what irked him was not that he had to make place for someone who, to his eye, simply fucked up. And I think the second is, you gotta remove the cursing, by the way. The second thing is, it's very early in the season still. Again, we have 16 races left, and that is the thing I feel many number 2 drivers who have complained about their status generally don't actually have that big a problem with it if they have to let go late in the season. Like for example, he didn't complain about it, but take Mika Salo, who, as far as I know, doesn't hold any grudge against Ferrari or Irvine for having to let go of what would have been his only win in Formula 1, simply because he knew, okay, I ain't going nowhere, Irvine is in the championship hunt, so I'm gonna let him go. And so that's what I feel might be the problem with Perez, that he's thinking to himself, hey, you know, I'm kinda not out of it yet, so can I please win a race? Maybe show that I should be the one.
And I wonder what the scenario is, like when Sergio Perez signs a contract with Red Bull, what do they say? Because I mean, the 90s at Ferrari were very specific. I mean, Eddie Irvine, I've seen many interviews of Eddie Irvine whereby he said, look, okay, I want a contract at Ferrari, and they're offering me one, and they said, okay, you understand that if you're driving for Ferrari, you will be number 2 to Schumacher, you will move over for him, we will give him all the best new bits, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And Irvine said, sure, I'll do anything you say, but as long as I get paid the same amount as he does. And that was Irvine's sort of, that's the reason why he's now the 7th or whatever richest person in Formula 1, in spite of having not driven in 20 years.
The man had a brilliant business sense. Say what you want about Irvine, he isn't on many levels a jackass, but he does know his way with money.
Yes, and he knew his place, and
sometimes that's the best way to make a whole lot of money.
The point I was going to make is that Ferrari were very, very public about their situation. Schumacher is our number 1, and you are our number 2. Mika Salo obviously probably got the same treatment in the back room when he signed that contract. Look, Salo, you will not win a race if Irvine is behind you. You will move over for him, because that is what it says here. But Red Bull famously like to lie about their their equality in the team. We obviously had in 2010, we had equality in the team, except for, let Vettel pass. We'll give all the new stuff to Vettel, even though he fucked up and broke his own, new parts and stuff like that. So, obviously the team in 2010 were favoring Vettel and just lying in public to say, no, we're equal to both drivers. And it's a very weird way to operate, because it's like, it would be better for clearing the air if you just announced it and said, look, we favor Vettel. And in this case, they favor Verstappen. Everyone knows they favor Verstappen. Everyone and their grandmother knows that Verstappen is the number 1 driver at Red Bull, and there is a clear number 2 for Sergio Perez.
Yeah. The thing is, why I feel those teams don't do it is because F1 fans, being the silly bunch that they are, tend to look down on team orders, because obviously they want the fair race with the actual best guy coming out on top, even though that is not really a realistic proposition given the nature of the sport and the importance of championship points. And that's why many teams, I feel, are very hesitant about saying, okay, we got the number 1, we got the number 2, because you're basically telling the fans, yeah, you like this guy? He ain't gonna win unless it's in our best interest to have him win. And that's why I feel many teams skirt around that issue, and especially since the history of team order has often produced situations where a swap simply wasn't objectively not necessary, which in the history of team order, it has often happened that changes were made when they weren't necessary. Like, take for example the infamous 2002 incident at the A1 ring, as it was known back then, the Red Bull ring as it is known today, where Rubens Barrichello was ordered to move over for Michael Schumacher, even though, okay, we both know Michael and Rubens were the only title contenders that year. And so that's why I feel many teams are hesitant about being open about the number 1 and number 2 status. But notice the name I just mentioned, because I think we have pretty much discussed everything in the present now. So
yes,
let's go to the past.
Yeah, let's meander very slowly to segment number 2.